What would you get if you combined the intense combat from Dragon Ball Z with the whole alien, sci-fi Earth defense feel of Guyver mixed with the cast of evolving characters set within a changing world? You would get Tekkaman Blade. But don't get me wrong about the whole Dragon Ball Z part. There's nobody going Super Saiyan, there's nobody destroying planets here, but the combat here is really intense. You've got characters just knocking somebody back and forth, teleporting from one side to the other like in Dragon Ball Z, with these massive energy blasts just like within Dragon Ball Z. You've got characters being blown through building after building after building, or mountains. You've got characters being blown through these mountains, and the action here is really intense, but that's not the only selling point within the series. This series really drives something that I feel is hard to find within anime that has characters that are so powerful as the characters within Tekkaman Blade. That is a sense of hopelessness, because usually whenever you have characters that are so powerful, it's hard to find a threat that really feels real for these characters here. They do a really good job of this because it feels like any given moment all of humanity could just be wiped out. Tekkaman Blade is a series which changes a lot throughout watching it, so I can't really not give any spoilers here. This review will contain light spoilers from the first third of this series, but whenever I get into any of the bits that will be spoilers, I'm going to be very vague so that it won't ruin the experience. But to be a proper review, there are just some things that I have to talk about here because this series changes so much. So in the beginning of Tekkaman Blade, we see Earth set in the future, and everything seems to be going alright, except for they have these alien plants which are just slowly taking over everything. We don't really know too much about them, and then we're introduced to this character known as Tekkaman Blade. He goes through name changes within the series. I'm just going to call him Tekkaman Blade, or Blade for short for this review, just to keep everything simple. But Blade here, he's a very mysterious character, and he actually has ties to the Rotom. Now, the Rotom here are an alien race which are trying to take over the world, and for numerous reasons. One reason I can't really reveal to you, but another reason is basically because they need a new world to live on. So here we have the Rotom, which are invading the Earth, and the Earth changes so much because of this. We see the Earth thriving and humanity thriving on Earth, and it just gets driven into this dark age where people can't even use electricity, and you can really feel like, oh man, it's like any given time here, humanity's just going to be wiped out. But aside from that, the ties with the main character to the Rotom are something that I felt were really great. So in the beginning of the series, we have Blade, who's kind of cold and doesn't really deal well with others, and as the series continues, he gets to learn more about the people that he's around, and he begins to form relationships with them, and it really changes his character overall. It's not really so much things that he does, but it's so much as the characters that he's involved with influence on him, changing him, and some of the things that he goes through. And he really goes through a lot of stress because he is the one Tekkaman that can fight against all of the Rotom here. All of humanity, they can try and put up a fight against him, but it's really left for Blade to fight against them. So it sounds kind of cliche. Blade is that one last hope for humanity. He's the only one who can save all of humanity and save the Earth from these alien invaders, but there are plenty of other things that make it a lot harder for him as well, because he's on Earth with the military, and he learns that there are people that you can and can't trust, because some people have these ulterior motives and really are just looking out for themselves, and you learn about that. But at the same time, he learns that there are some people which can be trusted, there are friends to be had, and aside from that, using this Tekkaman Blade suit of his, it really just has a lasting toll on his body, which will come into effect later on, which adds another element of hardship for this character. On top of that, as you're watching Tekkaman Blade, we learn more about him at the same time as everybody else learns about him, because we see these flashbacks into his past revolving things that are related to the Rotom and people that he knew in the past and their connection to the Rotom, so it's a big mystery with that, which really had me interested. So to be honest with Tekkaman Blade, it comes in these 3 DVD sets here. The first set, the first DVD I really enjoyed because everything was new to me. I was getting to learn everything, I was just getting into it, but the second and third discs within the first set here really put me to sleep numerous times. I had to go back and actually rewatch them because they put me to sleep so much because I felt that it was so boring. But then with the sets of 2 and 3, I felt that everything just took a 180. The action became much more intense. The story here became much more intense as well, as we learn more about these characters' backstories, as things begin to evolve, as the world begins to change. Everything here just takes a 180 for the sets of 2 and 3, and it just goes on from there as just being more enjoyable. But don't really get down about the first set. If you're watching this and you don't really care for the first set, continue watching at least halfway through the series. I guarantee that it will become much more enjoyable as you continue on, but the first part of it I didn't really care for too much. So my initial impression of Tekkaman Blade was that I thought that this was going to be a mech series. While it does contain a few mechs, Blade and all of the other Tekkaman here, they're not actually mechs, they're actually part alien. Here we have Blade, who is this typical, I've seen it a billion times already, the half-blood hero that's trying to save humanity from its darker side. Blade is part Rotom, but it's not typically like you'd find with a lot of these other stories where you'd have a half-blood hero where he's got the best of both worlds. He suffers because he's only halfway Rotom, because he's only halfway human. You can see him suffer and deal with these problems, and it really makes it a lot harder for him being halfway human, halfway Rotom. It's like the transition was never completely finished, so he's a lot weaker because of this, and this really comes into play, and I really like it because of that. It's not that he's this overpowered hero. He struggles, and he's actually weaker because of his humanity, but you see him fight with this. But with the main character, it's not just that he's a little bit weaker because he still has more of his humanity to him. It's that he has to fight these crippling issues, crippling health and mental issues, which come into play later on, and this really just makes you feel the stress that the main character is undergoing. But Blade isn't the only one that's fighting against his odds to defeat the Rotom. Here we have plenty of other humans which are much weaker than Blade trying to fight against them, and they're completely defenseless against them. Of course, over time they do develop better technology, but still they are no match for these Rotom or for the Tekkaman. Later on, we watch as the majority of humanity is just wiped off the planet, and also other characters that we learn about that kind of grow on us die as well. So it's not just like, oh, the main characters are going to fight and they're always going to win, they're always going to live on. That's not always the case here, and that's something that I really liked within Tekkaman Blade. The feeling of hopelessness isn't the only emotion conveyed here. As humanity fights against the Rotom, we see small little glimmers of hope, and also as we learn about more of the characters, and as we learn about their story, and as we see them change, we also warm up to some of them, so there's a bit of happiness here as well. There's a bit of comedy here as well, and I felt that it's kind of cheesy. Maybe it's just that it didn't age well, or that it was just trying to be a bit cheesy at sometimes. So when watching Tekkaman Blade, I had this feeling of watching this Saturday morning cartoon with all this really enjoyable action mixed within this despair of humanity fighting and struggling tooth and nail to try and survive. So with the ending of this series, of course I'm not going to tell you what happens, but I kind of expected it to be something like, oh, humanity has prevailed overall and destroyed these evil aliens and everything's going to be okay, or the aliens to just kill everybody and take over the world and take over everything. But it wasn't quite either of those. It was something that was kind of in the middle, this gray area between the two, and it really just left it open for other series. But what we did get after Tekkaman Blade was Tekkaman Blade 2, which is a set of OVAs, which is actually going to be re-released sometime soon if you're interested in that. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick that up or not because I didn't hear the best things about that. I heard that they weren't really all that great. So as far as the overall presentation of Tekkaman Blade goes, this was created in 1992, so the animation is gonna look a bit old, and here I did notice a lot, or some parts, where they would reuse animation, but I mostly noticed this in the first half of the series. The second half here, I really felt that they went all out with the action here, and that they really beautifully animated all of the action scenes here, but a lot of the times when you're watching characters talk, or some scenes where really nothing is happening, it kind of falls apart as far as the animation goes. And moving on to the audio here, the music here really, it didn't do anything too special in my opinion. I did enjoy the second opening and also the closing of the series, but as far as the actual the background music here, it's really nothing that special in my opinion. So moving on to the voice acting here, you can only watch this with subtitle, but if you can remember, this actually aired in 1995 in the United States under the name of Tekkaman Blade, but that actually, they cut out a lot of the series to make it suitable for TV. They cut out a lot of the more mature bits within the series. Now, this isn't really the most mature or emotion heart-wrenching series out there, but for its time of 1992, I guess you can say that it was pretty mature, and that it really did have a lot of emotion in it for its time, possibly, but I guess by today's standards of anime, I really would expect a lot more, but this is pretty old still. But for Tekkaman Blade, I can't really recommend that because they did cut out a lot. I haven't seen it, but I know for watching Tekkaman Blade, that this is a series that you should watch. You should definitely check it out if you're into series which have these massive wars against aliens in outer space, or if you're into mech series. Even though I said that this wasn't quite a mech series, this is still something that would appeal to mech fans. And anyways, overall, this is something that was a bit different than what I expected it to be. So after watching Tekkaman Blade, if you want more, there are actually 3 OVAs that pertain to the story of this original series here. 2 of these are somewhere within the middle of the series, but there's one that actually takes place after the ending here, and it's really interesting to see that with these OVAs, the animation is a bit different, and I thought they were pretty cool to watch, but they are actually included on these DVD sets here. There's also Tekkaman Blade 2, which is after this, which I mentioned, which I don't really think would be all that great just from reading other people's reviews, but I still might pick it up. But overall, Tekkaman Blade, I really wish that this would get a remake or something, and remake this to today's standards, and really just put more emotion into it, because for its time, it was great, but, you know, watching things of today's standards, I would kind of expect more. But still, Tekkaman Blade overall was a very enjoyable experience, aside from the parts from the first DVD set, which I didn't really care for, but it did pick up after that into something that I enjoyed. So if you've seen Tekkaman Blade, then let me know your thoughts about it in the comments section below, or if you've seen Tekkaman Blade and also Tekkaman Blade, let me know what you think about the differences. Was it edited heavily, or, you know, anything about the other series called Tekkaman Blade? Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.